Pauline McGarry. My story starts quite a few years back, really. It was when I went to a church in an evening for an evening service on a Friday, and some other ladies went with me. It was a lively church, and there was lots of people there, and I was enjoying the fellowship and worshipping God. And I was singing happily and really aware of God's presence there as well. And I was just talking to God, and all of a sudden I had a vision come into my mind, and I stopped singing, and I just thought, God's going to tell me something here. And I was aware of being in a field where the grass was beautifully green, and there was a river there, and it was really peaceful, and I saw a lot of flowers growing around me, and that's when I was aware that there was somebody else with me, and this person came close to me, and I had a feeling that this was Jesus. And he started to pick flowers up and put them into my arms, and they kept coming and coming until I'd really got a big bunch of flowers. And I looked down at them and I smelt them, and there wasn't any smell, and I was a bit disappointed. And I said to this person, I thought of God, I says, there's no fragrance in these flowers. And he said, if you want the fragrance, you've got to have the rose. And I says, oh, that's all right. I'll have it. Yeah, please. And that's how it went along. And he says, but there's something I've got to ask you. And he says, how much do you love me? And to be honest, I was a little bit taken aback. And he says, do you love me this much? And he lifted his hair from his forehead. I didn't actually see a face, I just saw this, like on his forehead, there were scars and marks where the thorns had cut into his head. And he said, do you love me this much? And all of a sudden I realised this vision was changing from one of where I was just so over the enjoying being in his presence. I'd got to give an answer here. And then he lifted his hands to me and he says, do you love me this much? And there was 2 holes, one in each hand. And he looked at me, and I was frightened, and I thought, oh gosh, I've got to say something. But I had to sit down because I've got to think about this seriously and not be frivolous and just say, oh yes, because I knew I was doing something and taking a step here that would take me to a different dimension with my walk with God. And I sat down, and I was really frightened, and I wasn't sure that I could say yes and be honest. But all of a sudden a peace came over me, and it completely covered me. And I knew then that like I never knew before, that God was right by me, and his peace just enveloped me. And I just stood up and I said, yes, I love you that much, Father. And I just carried on through the service, and I forgot about it really as the weeks went by. And it's probably about 3 weeks later, my husband wasn't very well, and he went to the doctors, and they told him he got an aortic aneurysm, which is very, very serious, and it was ready, they called it ripe, so it could go any time. So he came home and told me this, and we talked about it, and of course we was both very concerned. And Richard went upstairs to the toilet, I presume, and I was sitting in the front room, and I heard a noise, and I heard it again, and then I went out and I stood at the bottom of the stairs and shouted, are you all right? And I heard a groan, and I ran upstairs, and he was on the floor, and this aneurysm had burst. And at that point, I mean, you just go into like, well, you just don't know what to do. And I helped him to sit down because he hadn't lost consciousness. And I ran into the bedroom and I dialed 999 straight away. And I come back to Richard and I put my arms around him. And the one thing that just stays with me, and I probably will for the rest of my life, I put my arm around him and it was just as if I'd sort of started to record, and I kept saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And he turned up and he says, I love you as well. And that broke it like that, and I realised that I'd got to get my grip on myself. Anyway, they came and they took Richard to hospital, and I went with a friend as well, and Richard died that night. And as you can imagine, that was a massive shock. And it's one thing, a big thing that you've got to, get through. But I knew that God had already prepared me for it a few weeks before. So I knew that he was with me, and he really, really helped me through, all the way through it. And it was as if sometimes I was in a bubble and he was protecting me from the world and just carrying me through the time of grief. And one of the days, like probably 2 weeks later, I was praying to God and asking him if there's some way that I could just know that Richard was with the Lord. And a couple of days later, I went to bed and I had a dream. And in this dream, I was standing in my kitchen at home, and it was early morning, and I was looking out the window, and my neighbour was hanging a washing on the line. And in my mind, I thought, she's early, hanging a washing on the line, as you do. And then I heard somebody walking down the hall, and I turned round, and I just saw a figure coming towards me. And as it got closer, I could see that it was Richard, and he looked about 20, where he was 60, no, well, he would have been, but he looked around 20. And he was glowing like I've never, ever seen anybody like it. And I might never do until I go to heaven. But I knew that he'd spent time with the Lord. And I said to him, what are you doing here? I said, you should be with the Lord. And he said, I've come to kiss you goodbye. And he kissed me on the cheek. And he left me, but I know that God was there with me, and he blessed me, giving me that dream. And it was a dream. I wasn't seeing ghosts, it was a dream. But it was a dream I shall never forget, and I thank God for it. And I know that he brought me through the whole of that experience, and I know that he's with me now. So thank you.